Hi, I'm a blood mage at MetaCartel Ventures, and I also happen to run a hacker village in Korea with like 150 people living together who's all doing crypto.
All right, so this guy, a hacker village means a bunch of houses, super cool. He's like the central node in Korea if you want to know about crypto. He's been around for a really long time. 2014, ran the first YouTube channel
Yeah.
about crypto. Then people came around him, were like, what the hell is crypto? And then they tried to kind of find out. So they started co-working together, then they started co-living together. Then this bad boy got a bunch of houses and a big fucking building in the middle of Seoul, which is not that cheap. And that became Nonce, right? So super cool, super big into coordination, currently trying to figure out how to take this real life community of co-working, co-living people into sort of like a DAO structure. Hit him up.
Yeah, but let's talk about MCV. So what's MCV in a nutshell for you?
So MCV stands for MetaCartel Venture DAO. It was the first investment DAO that I know of, but I think it's probably...
Yeah, pretty sure it's the first.
Yeah, in general. So today we have about 70 members. If a new member wants to come in, they have to be championed by a member inside. And then they go through a vetting process. And the way it works is you contribute ETH, and you get some MCV shares in return. The amount of ETH that you contribute determines the number of tokens you get in return. And that matters because the 70 members vote on-chain for every investment that we make with the tokens that we receive, right? So people contributed more, they have kind of a bigger say, and people contribute less, have a little bit less of a say. That's the core of MCV today. We are a group of 70 members that are extremely diverse. Mostly builders, mostly founders. There's some investors also, some product people, some marketing people. Shit, I don't know what else. A whole bunch of people.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about like, I think there's a balance between like, one is like permissionless versus permission membership, right? That a DAO has, and then there's the other aspect of like, how do you curate to like maximize? For us, it's investment, obviously, right? So how do you curate membership in order to maximize the purpose of the DAO, right?
Yeah, so there's no real, I mean, as a DAO, especially because we're like 70 people that are pretty involved in general in crypto, everyone is pretty busy, right? So coordination is like a real big question, not just from the perspective that we are a DAO, but that almost nobody's full-time, right? Which like compounds kind of problems. So, you know, permissionless and permissionless access to kind of the DAO. I mean, you should talk a little bit about Nonce and DXDAO. But I mean, within MCV itself, the way that we look at new members is, how does someone add a set of resources that is somewhat unique compared to the existing resources we have inside the DAO? So one of the things that we pride ourselves on at MCV, which is an investment DAO, perhaps the first venture DAO, that's also what we call it, is that unlike most VCs that fund a product that solves a problem for people somewhere else, we fund products that solve problems that we have. It's like a VC funding its own problems, right? But because we have 70 people that are pretty involved in the ecosystem, we think we have basically a knowledge advantage, right? And so we're trying to fund the very problems that we experience, and we're actually trying out the very tools, some of which we fund or that we want to fund. Do you want to go in that direction, or?
Yeah, it sounds like before we head over to the community like tooling, DAO tooling direction, sure. Let's talk. But it's not honestly like if you've never been in an investment DAO, it sounds really good from the outside, right? Because you get access to superior deal flow. I mean, if it's founders are the first to know about deal flow from other founders, there's all that stuff. But there is like definitely a side that's not really mentioned, like the blood, sweat, and tears part. So let's talk about, I don't know where we want to start with this, but.
So many problems. I think the first one, right, which I alluded to earlier, is everyone's pretty busy building their own stuff. So the question is really, who gets the work done? Like, who does the work, right? And it's easy to say, well, you know, we leave it up to the community, but sometimes everyone's busy. It's just a way of like not getting work done. So there's this fine balance between people taking ownership of certain initiatives and driving them forward versus kind of giving up ownership and letting other people run with it. I think we have, to give you an example, I think what's happened over time within the DAO is that we've had certain groups that started to self-organize and kind of take on certain roles. So what does that mean? So as an investment DAO, we have a whole bunch of deals that come our way. Literally every day at Discord, people submit via the website or via personal recommendation. Everything coalesces in the Discord. Someone has to screen these deals, right? Literally, if there's too many deals, some deals just don't get looked at because everyone's too busy. The people who end up screening or taking the first call with a specific deal will typically be the same type of people. With something between 5 and 10 people, and they tend to do primarily that, right? Once the first call is taken, one or more of these people who were on the call will go back to the DAO and in a Discord channel created specifically for the deal will basically say what they find out, right, and what they think. And then there's a whole discussion process that starts. And actually, let me quickly take you through the process. So there are 5 stages, right, from I think, new deal to examination, scrutiny, then we have a soft poll, and then we have the final voting that's on chain. And then the voting period is a Moloch structure, so it's 7 days before it concludes. And then after the vote passes, it's either a yes or no vote. We either invest or we don't invest. And so at these different stages, we have typically different groups that have emerged in a way that's kind of self-organizing to address whatever needs are in that stage. But sometimes there's no one in that group. So this is a problem, right? There's no one around to do it, right? And deals come in every day. So I think the reality is we're not if you don't have full-time people, it's not that easy to run a DAO.
Yeah, so that's I know we had this conversation within Discord, right? The balance, the difference between MCV and the DAO is just there's an operational part that definitely needs to be managed within the throughout the deal process, right? And so you can have someone who kind of does back office operational stuff, and that'll actually expedite the process, and then the GPs, I guess, whatever you want to call it, they make the investment decisions. But to kind of go back, so another a pain point that I felt a lot is actually it comes to pooling resources, and this is about when we have so we have 70 members in the DAO, but how can we get a accurate enough this goes back to the needs and asset thing. How can we get accurate enough representation of the assets that they can offer, right? So a big thing might be portfolio company says, hey, we want to do a Twitter push, right? If I'm a VC, it's pretty easy to get everybody coordinated to do that. But here it's all right, who has these media resources? What kind of media resources do we have? And will people do it? Will we do it or not? Or even the same thing with a deal. If I bring in an NFT game deal, who actually has the chops to be able to look at NFT game deals? If I don't even have that knowledge to start with, I mean, it's very easy to be oh, Jiho has the chops, easy. But there are some other people who might not, who might be investing, who actually has a very specific interest in NFT games. And how can I know about that beforehand so I can go ahead and tap them on the shoulder, and then coordinate everything to try to set up a call and all that, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I actually would talk about it by looking at it in 2 ways. So I think one of the strengths of MCV is that almost all the members that come have very unique resources, which is one of the things that makes it so powerful, right? We can look at almost any deal, and we can kind of source expertise within our DAO or within our group to evaluate that deal. Now, the practical problem is getting that person with the expertise to actually look at the deal, right? So who is that person? I mean, some people will know more than others, and then actually getting that person to do the work, right? I mean, Jiho is a great example. He is ridiculously busy, right? Especially right now. So I think that's sort of one aspect between we have a bunch of resources, we have a bunch of needs, and the problem is for us not so much having the resources, but doing the matching.
Yeah, that's so hard. Let's talk about, I know this, I'm going to open up a can of worms, but let's talk about taxes.
No.
Yeah, there's no way we cannot talk about taxes. So
taxes are a major pain in the ass, I think, for everybody. So I think the way that we started out is we just had a Delaware company. So we just yanked it up as a partnership. Everyone's the same, right? So there's no GPs, LPs. Literally every person in the DAO is the same. So there's no leader. We all just members. Now the problem is it's a US entity, and there are non-US members and US members. And there's a bunch of issues of how taxes flow through to certain non-US members if you have a US entity, right? So that's that. And obviously no one wants to figure that out, right? Because that's not fun. So let's talk about DAOs, is more fun. I think that's one. I think another one is we're probably quite idealistic. So we're all about like coordination and like trying out new stuff, but doing like the dirty groundwork of figuring out like the legal entity setup that can kind of support our DAO operations is difficult. I know you should chill probably Opolis here.
Yeah, because they're our portfolio company.
Well, among others, but it's just super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah. So Opolis, I think, yeah, it's right. It's like a co-op that has a DAO aspect where if you're a worker that's working at several different DAOs, you could just get them to process everything, and then like from the government's perspective, it'll be like taxes are paid, your insurances are covered, and all that. But yeah, so that is great. Limitation is, yeah, again, it's only in the US. And there are so many of us who are our work life is ridiculous, and we're just, everybody's very, very ambitious. So we're working like many different, working out of many different DAOs. Like how do you, it's hard to figure out how to match all those things and get that stuff to line up.
Yeah, I actually think that's an opportunity. So for people who look at DAOs, like we can throw up a bank account, on a blockchain, pool money, and then decide how to spend that. And I think that has come up in different forms. But practically speaking, there's a whole bunch of issues with that, right? One is which legal entity and who is inside, non-US, US, what kind of taxes? If you get kind of an airdrop, like how do you account for these kind of things, right? If you do yield farming, certain members wouldn't get taxed in their own jurisdictions, but other members will get taxed in their own jurisdiction. So how do you set that up, right? Because they don't want to pay taxes because of the legal entity of MCV when in fact they wouldn't personally. So to this day, ironically, we're still not staking ETH, which is kind of ridiculous.
And every other token that we've invested in.
And almost every other token. Some unintentionally have snuck their way into imperfect information flows. So I think, these DAO toolings, right, for helping basically take DAOs into the real world, that's like a real opportunity space. And if I'm taking on my like VC hat, which is literally this one, MetaCartel has a chili with a sombrero, we're willing to fund those today. So if anyone has, I think, a bunch of experiences with this or has ideas, we're like super keen to listen. In fact, there are a bunch of service DAOs that have popped up, right? So they literally help other DAOs figure shit out. One of the big things that's super interesting, or I think that's emerging right now, is how DAOs interact with other DAOs, right? So how do we get a token from one DAO into another DAO, and how do we sort of exchange that? Dude, that shit's complicated. Someone's got to figure it out, but that's like a gangbuster idea. Like I'll personally invest, I'll say it right now, if anyone can kind of figure that out or tackle these kind of issues. And it's like, we're here at MetaCon. I mean, there's DAOs everywhere, everyone's in DAOs, and I think very soon we're going to move away from figuring out how do I join one DAO to how do we make DAOs kind of work together.
Yeah, I mean, even if we have like a lawyer here with a law firm who's like, okay, I'm going to figure out all the detailed nitty-gritty stuff about DAOs, about like which jurisdictions are friendly to launch DAOs and what kind of stuff you could do. And they're like, hey, we're open to servicing all DAOs. Like, you'd be making a lot of money, right? And definitely something that all DAOs would probably invest in.
Yeah, and that's just like a classic thing that's like cross-DAO, right? It's not just needed within an investment DAO, it's needed within an NFT DAO, it's kind of needed within any DAOs that sort of individual projects are starting a lot right now.
Yeah, so that I think that covers like the non-technical DAO tooling stuff. Let's talk about the technical DAO tooling stuff. Namely, I mean, we've used several tools, but let's talk about Coordinate just for a little bit. I know we've mentioned it before, and we're actually very heavily used it within our DAO.
Yeah, so Track was on stage earlier, right? So Coordinate, I don't know if you guys know, basically a website, you go on, you log in with your MetaMask, right? You just click a button, sign a message, and then you basically do two things. You say who you interacted with in the last 2 weeks, right? And let's say I interacted with 5 people, Sheehan being one person, and then 4 other people. Then I have 100 fictional tokens called gift tokens that are given to me. And I can now distribute these 100 tokens to each of the 5 people I interacted with before. Now, based on what criteria do I distribute these tokens? Basically, who gave me more value and who gave me less value. So we now have a way of having members of a community measure who delivered value to whom, which is really, really cool. Because we're moving away from an Instagram world of like, oh, who do I know by way of following, which like, what the fuck does that really mean? To like, who actually did something for me of value. And I'm gonna allocate certain tokens to that person. And if I talk to 5 people and I give it to 5 people here, and then like Sheehan talked to like, he talked to me also, but he talked to 4 other people, you start having a network of value flows that is measured on a consistent basis. And obviously that will eventually emerge into some kind of identity solution. Because what you really want to know is not, okay, how famous is this person in terms of number of Twitter followers, but you want to know how valuable is that person actually in the ecosystem, right? And because we're these communities that are super distributed, there's no like one person who sees what everybody does and then kind of rates like how valuable this thing is or something, right? It's everyone rating each other and then some kind of reputation system to make sure that you address some like issues with that. But I don't know, I think that shit was super excited. So using Coordinate, that's the dream, right? In practice, there are problems. Why don't you talk about them?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, as we were using these tools, there was a couple problems that popped up. One is, oh man, there's a lot. Actually, there's not a couple. There's a lot of problems. The biggest thing technically was, so in Coordinate, you would be like, you know, what did you do for this epoch? And epoch might be 2 weeks, and then so everybody writes up the kind of stuff that they did. Problem is that this is non-standardized data, right? So everybody's writing up stuff. I mean, Rolf might write up due diligence. I might write up DD. Some might do it in caps. Some might do it in lowercase letters, whatever. And then we're trying to value what each of us contributed within the past 2 weeks. Clusterfuck, right? Clusterfuck. It's helpful within the DAO, but the real value of DAOs, again, this goes back to like DAO to DAO interactions. The real value of DAOs, it seems like, is we are trying to make what's valuable. It's not just identification of friend or foe, right? So everything in DAOs right now is you're either in the DAO or you're not. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to see what kind of value can we lift from this DAO that will also interoperate with this value in this other DAO, and how are we gonna match those up? But the thing is, yeah, same, Coordinate, right? And just in the data standardization or collection part, nothing is standard. There's no real way for us to do this. So then, even when we link up all those social graphs, it's helpful within the DAO and itself, right? It's like, I think we're kind of mentioning that, like, what is it? Jiho said that he has like 15 different community archetypes, and then he's trying to see like, everything is a guess. But I think like the whole thing behind like crypto was that you could take like Bitcoin, right? You could do like macroeconomic snapshots of things. So it's like, why can't we do macroeconomic, not economic, but like value snapshots of what's going on across all DAOs? And for that to happen, if Coordinate's a social graph, we definitely need something like data collection or standardization, something really small that can be composable and can plug into all these DAO toolings as it exists today. So.
Yeah, so it's non-standardized data. I think it will become standardized, but it's not today, so it's a problem. But I think, yeah, these are problems that can be solved, right? I think even on top of the having a look on where value is exchanged, right, actually being exchanged based on past actions, I think these are purely Web3 native ways, right? And to me, it's also a way of actually managing communities from the bottom up. So what you'll find is that just like with an MCV, we have individual group taking care of certain work streams, right? I tend to think of these things as self-organizing groups. So what doesn't work and what's non-scalable, and I've seen this across several DAOs and communities, and Jiho mentioned that partly too, is initially you have one person that catalyzes a small group, 5 to 10 people, back in the days in the Axie Discord, right? This is how he kind of got into Axies. I think with Songcamp, you have Matthew, who is trying to catalyze 42 people. And when I was talking to him, he was like, dude, I'm being burnt out. I just can't do it. I have to listen to everyone's opinions and I have to call them. And so the only way to make that happen is to let people break away into small groups that have a small work stream, very defined scope of work, and then they just evaluate themselves based on that. I can evaluate how much value 5 people give to me, but evaluating how much 500 people give to me, I'm going to stop using that tool. That shit's not fun, right? And I can't even remember. I don't want to fill it in. It's stupid, right? And so I think this idea of DAOs as evolving towards some set of self-organizing groups that are part of a bigger structure has a number of interesting implications. For example, yesterday, I forgot who I was talking to, but there was this idea, we commonly say there's a 20-80 relationship. 20% of the work you do yields 80% of your output. And we were saying, like with DAOs, it's more like 5 and 95. Like 5% of the work that you do yields 95% of the outcome. So why is that? And I think it's because the 5% that we do is so much more specific. It's just that small work stream in a very small group that really can have a very large impact on the bigger community or bigger organization as a whole. And this is why it also becomes, another implication of that is, if I know, for argument's sake, how to set up legal stuff for DAOs, I might actually end up doing that for 23 DAOs. And if someone asks me Rolf, what do you do? I'm like, well, in this case, I guess I would say legal setup of DAOs, but typically you do a bunch of different shit, but it's always very, very specialized, right? So I think defining people by a membership to an organization is not as exciting as defining a person by where they lie in the value graph. Where have I delivered value before, and where do I want to deliver value in the future? And I think it's going to be a new way for how people answer the question, what do you do? It's not just affiliation anymore.
Yeah, something I want to bring to the table with that is, I actually think we're thinking of DAOs as, in some ways, the ultimate form of organism that's going to continue to evolve, right? But if we think about it more nature-like, you'll have small cells, right, or groups of cells that will also have its own individual evolution. And I feel like, I don't know, just my half a year experience at MCV, or now it's close to a year now, but we've been focused so much on the greater picture of how all 70 people are gonna coordinate at exactly the same time, right? But much like Ethereum, you gotta shard that. So what kind of sharding, if that's the right word, what kind of divisions must we have within, obviously everything's a flat organization, but what kind of divisions can we have within the DAO so that each of these divisions also catalyzes, has catalyzing effects so that it makes the whole pie or the whole organism even stronger.
So I'll pitch an idea that I'm really excited about. So I did a PhD, and a bunch of this stuff was network theory, and so there's some really interesting insight. So there's a quick story. So in 1973, there was a guy called Mark Granovetter. He's now a professor emeritus at Stanford. He did his dissertation in Boston asking a bunch of people looking for a job, from whom do you get a job? And there's really 2 types of people. People you know really, really well, and people you don't know very well. Think of them as strong ties, like your friends and your family, versus weak ties, right? So who do you get a job from? And the intuitive answer would be, well, the people that I know really well, because they're going to give me a lot of information. They champion me to whoever they know. But what he found was that it wasn't the people that you knew very well. It was people you didn't know very well. That's how you find the most jobs. And he was like, why is that? And then he realized that the people that you know really well, they all know each other. So the diversity of information is really, really low. Versus people that you don't know very well, they know a lot of different people, a lot of different companies, a lot of different job opportunities. Why is that? Because if you were to draw this out in a social graph, and you are one node, the people you know very, very well all know each other. You're all connected. But the people you don't know very well, they're connected to other social groups that they know very, very well. So what you actually want, and this is going back to your question in a second, is when you figure out how to structure a community in a network theoretic sense, you want to have some strong ties. You want to have a small group with an MCV that you're part of and you solve a given work stream, but you also want to be weakly connected to other groups, right? And there are literally tens of thousands of papers on the strength of weak ties. That's what it's called. So there's an optimal number or optimal proportion of weak ties that each of us should have. And it's a problem that you have right here in the conference, right? Do you meet everyone? I mean, there's really more. There's like too many people. You don't remember the names. You don't remember the details. What you really want to know is who's your like core crew, but at the same time, you want to connect to different groups so that you can get information that's popping up in crypto, which is like ever-changing and very fast, in a very efficient way. So there's a manageable network where you don't have a Telegram with like 200 fucking messages every time you wake up. And instead, you have this like optimized structure on the individual level. But you could think of that on a work group level. You could think of that in a DAO level. And DAO should be very well connected to like 2-3 other DAOs, very strongly, lots of communication, but eventually they'll have groupthink. They'll think the same shit, right? So you need to be connected also weekly to others. So I think one way of managing DAOs will require a tool that doesn't just measure value flows, right? But who's connected to whom, and sort of what's the frequency of interaction? How long have they known each other, and how close are they? And again, there are tens of thousands of network science papers that lay this out and that show that there's many benefits to having weak ties, right? So you don't just, so you don't just want to have strong ties, you don't just want to have weak ties, you want to have something in between. We need that shit. I'm funding it again, right?
Yeah, so in regards to that, I think that what you're pointing to is, I think right now we're trying to figure out like DAOs, but DAO toolings is pointing us to the question behind like meta DAOs. All of us are learning lessons within our DAOs, but this is not being shared across all DAOs for other DAOs to take and adopt. And I don't know how we're gonna get this together. Maybe I don't know if a meta DAO exists, but maybe we should, not just like Uber House type of thing, but like really like we need to get together and start sharing lessons across. And these lessons are not just about what kind of new features will be added onto Moloch v3. Sure, that's a technical solution, right? But there are so many aspects, like you said, like what is an efficient way to at each growth stage, maybe less than 10 people, and like maybe at like 30 to 50, and maybe like 50 to 100, 100 and above. What are some of the best practices that I can use if I'm a particular type of DAO? Because a DAO exists in the future that face the exact same problems that I did now, right? Those aren't being shared, and also with that, now I'm just thinking that maybe some of these tooling we should kind of outsource them over to Raid Guild.
I'm down.
Right? Yeah, we should. I mean, we should utilize. I think we should utilize all the DAOs within the MetaCartel ecosystem and beyond a little bit better, and increasing instances of these interactions, and actually interactions not just with token flow, but like actual like we just don't have time, or this is not our specialty, so we want to outsource this over to you. You can solve the problem, come back, and then maybe that also increases weak tie, right? It's like weak tie, not for the sake of, hey, I'm meeting you at a party, networking, but also like there's a very specific purpose to why we're doing this. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think like a couple comments about that. First of all, anyone who will transfer learnings from DAOs to others, that person will not only become famous, but will get paid a shit ton of money. And it's something that we need today, just across DAOs, right? And it really is as much as like you just go interview people in DAOs and you're like, what did you learn? Like go interview Matt, go interview like some people at MCV, go in, whatever, a bunch of people, right? Super needed today. I don't know who's listening, but it's super needed today. What was the other point?
The other point was about like outsourcing. Outsourcing, like, so for us to, if we have an idea about a tool, we should definitely hand that off to Raid Guild for them to try something out and then get back with us.
Yeah, it reminds me like another thing that's really needed is like not a board of, it's almost like asking people in DAOs, what do you wish you had? I guess almost like customer discovery, right? Classic customer discovery. And imagine you just had like a website and every row is just like what people actually just want to solve their problems today. Maybe we should do that. All right, let's see what we get done.
Yep.
Any case, I don't know, that's it, shit. I mean, networks, right, MCV, bunch of different people with strong ties, connected weekly within the DAO, perfect transparent data, we can take advantage of that stuff. We're not yet, but we will. MCV is the shit. I don't know, what else?
Go Chili.
Go Chili, go Chili.
All right, thank you.
All right,
everyone.
thank you guys.